Imagine yourself flying at incredible altitude of 40,000 meters above the tiny village of Pando in the Beas Valley, Himachal Pradesh. And you are looking north. This is what you will see. The entire valley floor and the side valleys of the Beas River basin in Kullu are visible. The Beas Valley is hemmed in the north by the Pangi range, otherwise called the Eastern Pir Panjal, which is seen branching off from the Great Himalayan Range on the right side. To the left, the Dhauladhar range branches off towards the south. And between these ranges is the Kullu Valley, with the Beas River flowing south. At the head of the valley lies the Rohtang Pass. This is Rohtang Pass, where the monsoon more or less comes to a stop. North of this lies the cold, arid desert of Lahaul and the Trans-Himalayas. This is also the abrupt dividing line between two of the world's great faunal realms, the Oriental to the south and the Palearctic to the north. Simply stated, this means that animals, trees, birds and insects found to the south of it are generally not seen to the north of it, and of course, vice versa. The Rohtang sits astraddle the Pir Panjal, which reaches its highest elevations in this region. Peaks of 19 and 20,000 feet crowd the skies at the head of the valley. Below the Rohtang Pass to the south lies the valley of the river Beas, the famed Kullu Valley. Although Beas River does not run and cut through the main Himalayan range, nor is it as long as other Himalayan rivers, it is a classic example of a vast catchment area, and thus some of the finest temperate forests in the western Himalayas are seen in Kullu Valley. Fully 1,800 square kilometers of land in the upper Beas is designated as reserved or protected forest. But appearances can be misleading. Species diversity is on the decline, and the moist temperate forests, home to various species of Himalayan wildlife, are fast disappearing. In terms of its physical geography also, the area has some unique characteristics. Heavy glaciation during the last ice ages has affected the topography and landscape considerably, leaving extensive rocky moraines and hanging valleys like the Hamta Valley, making the modern-day Kullu Valley a trekker's and mountaineer's delight. It is the smaller side valleys, like the Solang Nala, the primary source of Beas, which makes Kullu Valley unique in the western Himalayas. The area is a veritable textbook model of the gradations in alpine landscape, flora and fauna, all compressed within a few kilometers. At the head of the valley lies the Beas Plain, surrounded by this great amphitheater of peaks, glaciers, and ice falls. At its head is the Hanuman Tibba Massif at nearly 20,000 feet. It's 8-kilometer-long glacier giving birth to the main stream of the Beas. Kullu is known as the Valley of the Gods because each village has its own resident devta. And no wonder, for in such a paradise even gods would love to dwell. The main valley is fairly extensively settled and is currently undergoing boom time thanks to apple cultivation and tourism. The most important town and tourist destination in the Beas Valley is Manali, a town that until 30 years ago did not exist on the map. Today now boasts of 350 odd hotels and around 1,500 tourist taxis. And this development has, however, not been a result of any planned growth, but has literally mushroomed like some old mining town in the Wild West. With the focus of tourism shifting to Manali, the last few years have seen the growth of this town into a mini city. Yet the infrastructure in terms of waste and garbage disposal, water and roads still remains at the small town level. Garbage to the order of tons is openly dumped in the Beas and the surrounding hillsides. During the tourist season, there is a chronic water shortage. And worst, for the city dweller come for a Himalayan break are the traffic jams, as Manali's quaint Pahari streets turn into a quagmire of honking cars. Needless to say, the tremendous construction activity places a severe stress on the biotic reserves of the surrounding areas. And of course, the worst sufferers are the forests. As I mentioned earlier, the catchment area of the Upper Beas houses one of the finest temperate forests of the entire Himalayan region. These trees in front of the 1,000-year-old Hidamba Devi temple are almost as old themselves and stand 70 meters high, just a few meters short of Delhi's Qutub Minar. Take the case of Solang Nala, which in 1977 was put forward as the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve under the UNESCO's program of Man and the Biosphere. Unfortunately for Solang Nala, nothing came of it. And today Solang Nala is under severe ecological stress. Extensive road building activity, blasting, and destruction of forests as they become more amenable to exploitation have led to the disappearance from this area of birds and animal species that could be frequently seen and sighted a few years ago. As man extends himself further and further up into the Himalayas, the space for other species decreases. And ultimately, the worst sufferer is man himself. Drastic deforestation in the upper catchment areas has led to a decreased ability of the land to retain and retard water flow. The unusual rainfall leads to disastrous results downstream, as happened in September 1988 and every year since, when flash floods in the Beas wreaked havoc in the entire valley, washing away roads, communication links, and people. And this was by no means felt only in Kullu Valley. The people in Punjab fared the effects 18 hours later. The alarming thing about this is that though development is taking place all over the Himalayas, in Kullu, because of the thrust imparted by tourism, it is proceeding at an exponential rate. The entire region between Kullu and Manali is in danger of becoming one continuous urban sprawl. Economically also, this development is not sound, as Manali town already has an overcapacity of hotel rooms. Tourism returns will tail off as forests, mountain vistas, birds and animals disappear in a conglomeration of hotel rooms, roads and Marutis, with the accent more on cable television rather than the great outdoors. The spearhead of this invasion is plastic, posing the most serious threat to ecology next to deforestation. Paper and other biodegradable materials having been pushed out of the market, plastic bags and plastic bottles have now become a symbol of the ever-increasing threat to this sylvan environment. The indestructible plastic, born out of man's success in altering the alchemy of matter, will remain clinging to the rocks, embedded in the soil, and will outlast the melt of the glaciers, the rise and fall of the forests. If tourism and its unplanned growth effects are a very recent blight on this valley of the gods, apple cultivation has been around much longer, with an even more pronounced long-term effect on the local ecosystem. Apple is not indigenous to the Himalayas. It was a British import over 100 years ago. However, it is only in the last 15 years or so, with the development of transport, marketing, and cold storage infrastructure, that apple growing has become big business for the growers in the Kullu Valley. Once again, the main sufferers are forests. Orchards encroach into forest land, and most importantly, the requirement of wood for apple packaging ensures the transformation of generations of stately oak and deodars into cheap, one-time use apple crates.
Previously, this area was a sore spot in Manali, and it was being used as an open-air lavatory by the local people as well as by the labor who was passing this way over to Lahore. Only previous year we closed this area, and now whatever you see is the result of that closure. The ground is now covered with grasses, where previously there were all dirt and dust, that there are set naked roots, but now that their roots are also not visible.
We are very grateful for this step because it was very necessary. These forests were slowly being destroyed because of the pressure of the population and them. But after having spent so much money on enclosing them, unfortunately they did not provide certain facilities for the city folks to go. They were using these forests for their personal needs. And Manali needs badly latrines and toilets. This could have been a part of the project.
Tourism, while having its downside, has its flip side too. Besides the all too obvious economic impact, is the impact that tourism has on local cultures and people. Sometimes this impact can be disastrous, but in the case of Kullu Valley, it can be said to have been to a large extent beneficial, promoting a resurgence in local cultures. The Kullu Dashera is now famous world over, and the Kullu cap adorns millions of heads. This increased demand for handicrafts means boom time for pattu weavers and embroiderers. In this age of satellite television and quick communication, it is no longer only the tourist who comes in as an outside influence. Besides widespread exposure to television, the mountain people themselves have started moving down into the plains, especially those from the more affluent and business-oriented communities from the Kullu Valley. Unfortunately, sometimes this has had a disastrous effect on the local aesthetics. The most glaring example is architecture. For generations, villages of the Kullu Valley were famed as being amongst the most beautiful in the entire Himalayas. Ornately hand-carved balconies and windows set in stone stood framed against the backdrop of these mighty peaks. Today, the countrywide passion for so-called Pakka RCC construction has caught on, regardless of its general unsuitability for the mountainous region. And carved wooden balconies are being ripped out to be replaced by decorative bathroom tiles. Tin corrugated sheets replace slate roofs, and a magnificent architectural tradition dies out. All cultural import is not bad, however, and a manifestation is the recent passion for adventure sports like parasailing, hang gliding and cross-country skiing amongst the local youth. The young people from around these villages have competed at Chamonix in France and elsewhere in Europe and Japan recently. This young man attempts breathtaking feats that appear deathly to us ordinary mortals. He launches himself in his delicate parasail off a precipice a few thousand meters above Manali and sails and swoops down to a landing here in the Beas Valley. I am now standing in this hamlet of Palchan, which is just a few kilometers above Manali and below the Rohtang Pass. And from this place comes a proud young girl who in 1993 stood on top of Mount Everest. The girl, Dicky Dolma.
उसके बाद जो सेकंड प्री एवरेस्ट हुआ वो 92 में हुआ था, ये ईस्टर्न काराकोरम रेंज में हुआ था। तो इसमें ममस्तंग कांगरी पीक थी और काफ़ी टेक्निकल पीक था ये। हम लोगों को लगा कि बहुत ही ऐसे इतना मेहनत करना पड़ा वहाँ पे। हम लोगों ने 15 लोगों ने 15 अगस्त के दिन ही ये क्लाइंब किया था। जब मैं ऊपर पहुँची तो इतना मुश्किल हुआ मुझे जैसे फर्स्ट दिन लोड फेरी कर रहे थे एकदम से वहाँ पे क्रेवासीज गए थे तो एकदम मेरे मुंह के आगे ऐसे एकदम फट गए। पहले तो मुझे लगा कि हम लोग क्यों आए होंगे, बाद में मैंने सोचा जब इस गेम्स को मैंने चुना ही है तो मतलब किस बात से डरना, अब अगर मौत भी आए तो कोई मतलब डर नहीं है।
तो माउंट एवरेस्ट पे चढ़ के आपको कैसा लगा?
मुझे वहाँ पर जाकर बहुत खुशी हुई, लेकिन उसके साथ साथ ऐसा भी लग रहा था कि वापसी में बहुत सारे एक्सीडेंट्स जैसे वापसी में ही होते हैं, तो हम लोगों को वापसी में ज़्यादा केयर से चलना, केयरफुली, तो वहीं पे अपनी खुशी उतना जाहिर नहीं कर पाए हम लोग।
The monal is also Himachal's state bird and was once found practically all over the western Himalayas. But the disappearance of their habitat in the form of dense ground vegetation has brought the monal to the brink of extinction. Monals formerly occurred in the front ranges of the Himalayas around hill stations such as Shimla, Mussoorie and Dalhousie. Whereas the last reported monal sighting at Shimla was prior to 1920, and it's been ages since any has been seen at Mussoorie, they are, however, relatively numerous in both Kullu Valley and Kinnaur. Poaching, though, continues to take a serious toll. This area serves as a model as far as habitat protection is concerned. Such dense forests at such a comparatively accessible location do not occur anywhere else in the western Himalayas. The presence of lower altitude oak forests in the Tirthan Valley is also unusual compared to other areas in the Beas Valley. One of the major factors contributing to the natural state of these forests is the absence of gaddis and their flocks. Inner Siraj does not lie on any of the gaddi migratory routes, unlike Bhuntar and Solang Nala, where extensive grazing by both the gaddi and the Gujar flocks have brought about gross changes in the ground vegetation, thereby threatening species that require a dense ground vegetation like the cheer and the western tragopan pheasant. Road building activity in the Selong Nala is only a foreshadow of the depredation that awaits the upper Selong Nala, where species that were frequently sighted, like the Himalayan black bear, the leopard, the yellow-throated marten, are now very rarely seen, whereas ungulates like the musk deer, the sirau, the Himalayan Tahr and the ibex have now virtually disappeared from this area. Solang Nala, as I mentioned earlier, is an alpine wonderland, where within a few kilometers, one can see all the vistas of the Himalayas. The pressure from hikers, trekkers and mountaineers is an ever-increasing one on this area. Conducted in small numbers, these activities are fairly non-intrusive. However, Solang Nala today has become a training ground for a large number of hikers and mountaineers. The wildlife does not get a respite in winter either, what with organized adventure sports and ski meets taking place here. In a few years' time, visitors to this area will not be able to understand why this area was once proposed as a national park and a biosphere reserve. It is very necessary to publicize the inroads being made into the steadily dwindling population of Schedule 1 and 2 fauna due to depredations by poachers, especially in the case of 3 commercially important species like the musk deer, the Himalayan black bear and the male monal pheasant. In spite of stiff penalties being imposed by the law enforcement agencies, poaching is rampant. This magnificent valley is in danger of becoming paradise lost because of man's greed and ignorance. And as usual, the first line of defense is awareness. Citizens, NGOs and government bodies have to open their eyes, lest we lose forever a valuable part of our Himalayan heritage.